Watching this later on the taped version of this. I'm so happy that we are able to offer this program to you. This is being brought to you by the Oklahoma Conference of Churches from the Religions United Committee, which is the interfaith team associated with OCC. My name is Reverend Diana Davies, and I am the lead minister at First Unitarian Church in Oklahoma City. And I am thrilled to be with you today. And we have a number of other participants. One is still in transit, and we hope that he'll be joining us later. That's Reverend Brian Tenner, who is the Director of Contextual Ministries for the Indian Missionary Conference of the United Methodist Church, and we hope he'll be joining us. We also have with us this evening Mr. Zachary Kampf, who is the Director of Jewish Student Life at the University of Oklahoma. And we're very happy to have him with us this evening. And then we have Ms. Dwee Williams, who is a teacher, an artist, a storyteller with a master's degree in creative drama and children's theater. She is the director, I believe you still are, of Rhythmically Speaking, which is an educational and cultural theater group for young audiences and an advocate for children with special needs. And Mr. Kampf is going to be telling us tonight a little bit about Hanukkah, and Ms. Dwee Williams will be talking to us about Kwanzaa. So I would like to go ahead and turn it over to Zachary, if you will. Just say a little bit more about yourself and the organization that you serve, and maybe if you could just tell us a little bit about Hanukkah.
You got it. Yeah. My name is Zach Kampf. I am the Director of Jewish Student Life at Hillel at the University of Oklahoma. And basically, we are the hub for Jewish student life on campus. Norman only has one Jewish organization, and that is us, but there are multiple in the city. So we try to provide Shabbat services, which are our religious services on Friday nights for our students. We also do all of our Jewish traditions and holidays and try to make it kind of like their home away from home. I mean, it's a lot of students who are in Oklahoma for the first time, and they're used to larger Jewish communities, and then they get into Norman and they're like, oh wow, there's like 10 of you here. But we exist, and we try to co-program with a lot of the organizations in the city. And yeah, it's a great little community. I was a former student there from like 2009 to 2015. I got my master's in HR and worked in nonprofit and higher ed for a while. And then I saw this position opened up, and it was such a meaningful place for me. And so I knew I wanted to return back if I could. So I heard props were okay to bring. So I definitely wanted to contribute as much as I could. But since Hanukkah just ended, but this is one of my menorahs that I actually received from one of my professors at OU. I got my minor in Hebrew. And to be honest, I have not kept up with my Hebrew, so it's fairly bad at this point in life. But she gave me this because I was an RA, and you could not light candles in the residence halls. So something I did at that time was I made paper candles that I could just put above each one so I didn't burn down the dorms at OU. But I wanted to bring this because this has been with me for some time. And if you guys haven't had the chance to see a menorah, this is pretty much a miniature version. But our Hanukkah candles go in the middle, and then we read Hebrew from, it's inverse, so from right to left. And you also light the candles in that order too. So I actually broke off a few of these when I brought it home today. So I wish I could put them in correctly. But yes, this has anyone gotten to see a menorah or light a menorah? Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we have, these are our Hanukkah candles. They're usually thin enough, and you want to light the bottom of them so you can secure them so they don't fall out. But really, Hanukkah is it's one of it's the one that I feel like is most represented in Judaism. But it's funny because it's kind of the one for us that's like, this is just for fried, about fried food and presents and for 8 nights. But really, the story is that a miracle happened during the rededication of the Second Temple in Jerusalem, and there was a light that was lit, and it was supposed to only burn for essentially one night, and it burned for 8 days and nights. And so I've kind of, in terms of unifying religions and holidays that we all celebrate, I think light seems to be the common theme a lot of the times. And I got to give a speech at OU recently, and across the board when we were celebrating all of our religions and the holidays that we celebrate, one thing in common is just this idea of light, or lighting out the darkness during these times. Yeah, but we at Hillel, we have a number of other holidays. I know Hanukkah is the most recent one. We just recently celebrated high holidays as well, which that includes Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and those services are quite a bit longer. They're all-day services for the most part, and we cook and provide meals for our students and faculty in the area. And we've been lucky enough to have one of our rabbinic students come back and lead those services. So a local Normanite getting to, for the first time, kind of lead the high holiday services for students and faculty and staff at the university. And we had about 75 plus people, which is, for us, really great. We have relatively a small population, but we were grateful to have as many participants, non-Jewish, Jewish, were there. And Hillel is not, even though we're the hub for Jewish student life, I think we're, we have interns who are not Jewish, or are dating somebody who is Jewish. So it's a place for all. We really want to make this a welcoming space. Now in the spring, we're getting ready for Passover. So if you haven't gotten to attend a Passover service or are interested in it, I encourage people to come by because it is such a fun experience. So Cassie, who couldn't be here tonight, she is our executive director, but also a wonderful cook as well. So this is where you'll get to try matzo ball soup. If you haven't had the opportunity to try matzo ball soup, it's good stuff. And we'll typically, fix a traditional Jewish cuisine, which, it's a lot of matzo ball soup. But we try to, with food, especially in the building, we want to have it. We have a kosher kitchen. So meat and dairy just don't mix. And we have 2 separate sinks. So during these holidays, we're cooking for lots of people, but it can get pretty hectic in the kitchen, especially when you have to be on high alert, like, oh wait, did that mix with the meat and cheese? So obviously no pork in the building. That's a big no. But yeah, we are the hub for Jewish student life in our area, and we try to connect students as best as we can with other local agencies in the area. But yeah, I'm trying to think of any other holidays that
Well, let me ask you
Yes.
a question that I hear sometimes, because when we bring out the menorah, sometimes at our services,
Mhm.
people might ask, why is it so early this year? Why is it? Can you explain? Can you answer that question for folks who have that question? Why does it change around?
I have I truly, Cassie and I were talking about this because we usually plan for our semesters in the summer and just, mark all of the holidays. And when we got around to Hanukkah, we were like, wait, what? This feels like it's like 2 weeks early. Um, I would have to get back to you on that. I don't think either of us knew. I think someday, at some point someone decides when it is, and there you go. I wish I had a better response. I'm sorry.
I think it has to do with lunar calendar versus solar calendar.
Okay. Yeah.
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 Well, yeah, it's interesting. And you mentioned a little bit about greasy foods. Are there particular foods that you love
Yeah.
to eat that your family would eat?
Yeah, absolutely. So Hanukkah, like I said, it seems to be the holiday that most people can identify to, Judaism. But with Hanukkah, we make latkes, which is, if you haven't, I keep saying this, if you haven't had this, you got to try it, but you really do. A latke is shredded potato. I made so many of them, and I don't know if you can see my battle scar
Oh,
here.
yeah.
Here's my third prop, my scab. But yeah, so we we had a Hanukkah party last Friday, and one of the former alumni and I just were pushing out latkes all day. You can make sweet potato latkes, you can make regular potato latkes. And again, it's shredded potato that is just fried in a lot of oil. It's not healthy at all, but it is delicious. You put matzah seasoning in it. Like I said, I feel like every Jewish dish or like traditional Jewish dish, you're like, throw some matzah seasoning in there. And so it's just this crispy, it's almost like a large tater tot, that's kind of the best way I can describe it. They're savory. There's some can be sweet, some can be more savory. We will do like I personally like the savory ones with a little bit of sour cream, and you can do some chives on top, or some people like it with applesauce, which I've never been a fan. I feel like the flavors clash, but some people dig it. And another thing is sufganiyot, which is just basically another fried donut. And we made a lot of those this year. And gosh, how many? I think we made about like 50 or 60 jelly filled donuts. Again, very unhealthy. It is just this fried dough, and you inject it with, you can do raspberry filling or strawberry filling, anything like that. And then you top it with some powdered sugar. And yeah, really good stuff. I will say that the food during our holidays is so good. And I definitely encourage people, if they have the chance, to attend a service. Or high holidays is a big one, but with Passover coming up in the spring, that would be a good one for people to check out if they were interested.
I have one more question for you, and then we'll go on. I hate to even have these words come out of my mouth, but I know I hear it. People saying, "Oh, Hanukkah, that's the Jewish Christmas." Can you tell us what's wrong with that statement?
Yeah, I mean, for for us, it's I guess the direct parallel is, I mean, they're just completely two different holidays. Like sorry, I'm trying to, I guess, yeah.
It was a hard question.
No,
There's so
yeah,
much there.
this one's making me think. This is a really good question. For Hanukkah, I feel like it, for the Jewish people, is about the rededication of the second temple, right? And like kind of the miracle of light, and this almost like renewal or second chance. And whereas, and I don't want to say like, I know for Christmas. And also I come from my family is interfaith family as well. So one parent is Jewish and one parent is not. So I grew up celebrating both. But I don't know. I always get that a lot, and I was like, I know they're not the same thing, but and I feel like also I hate to say this, but I feel like Christmas has even lost like the true meaning of Christmas, right? Like it's become just a kind of about video games and gifts and whatever it is. But I'm sorry,
No, that's
I
okay.
butchered that.
Maybe we'll come back and maybe you'll have some more
Yeah,
thoughts.
I need to.
I'll give you some time.
Thank you.
Thanks, Zachary.
Yeah, not a problem.
Well, I'm gonna jump over to Ms. Dewey Williams and ask her to say maybe a little bit more about herself and her really interesting interfaith background, and then tell us a little bit about Kwanzaa.
Okay, well, I'm a pretty open person, and so I've kind of visited with a lot of different faiths. As a matter of fact, I think one of my closest friends is a Quaker, and that teaches me about silence. Is most of what I get out of that. I think I wanted to, among other things, expose my children to a lot of different faiths, so they would have some options. And as a single parent of 7, I have to laugh as I hear him talk about Judaism, because I could remember when we practiced as Messianic Jews and people lit the candles. And with my 7 kids, I was like, no way. So I had battery operated candles because all I could see was a little fire at the table with my crew. So I've been always pretty universal, I think, in my approach to religion, as well as my style of child rearing. Everything I do is kind of universal. By primary profession, maybe you would say I'm a storyteller. I'm a playwright. I'm a single parent of 7. I'm an educator that blends all of that together. I love to work intergenerationally and multi-generationally and multiculturally, because those to me are not impossibilities. They're just challenges and opportunities to modify so that everybody can feel comfortable. And so tonight, focusing on Kwanzaa. Kwanzaa really started 1966, and it really, in part, came out of some of the unrest of the 60s. Coming out of that, a feeling that African Americans needed a way to experience and celebrate culture that was unique to them, and was also a way to build self-esteem and pride in their culture. So we started Kwanzaa in 1966, and actually the first celebration was in California. And now there are millions of people who celebrate Kwanzaa. Kwanzaa is not so much at all a religious celebration. It is a celebration of culture and community. So it's an opportunity to focus on the African American culture and what it brings to the table, and the value of the culture. During Kwanzaa, Hanukkah beats us by 1 day. Hanukkah's 8, we're 7. And actually, with the spelling of Kwanzaa, it really should have had only 1 A, but it has a double A at the end in order for it to have 7 letters in the spelling of the word. So there are 7 principles that are covered during Kwanzaa. And the first night is unity. And it's just an opportunity for people to realize that in a unified approach, we can accomplish more if we all work together. So the first night is unity. The second night is self-determination. And that's just talking about the fortitude and what's necessary to be uh, determined that you're going to value yourselves, that you're going to work hard to accomplish what you feel like you want to accomplish. And then the third night is collective work and responsibility. And that says if we all work together, it's much easier to get the task accomplished than if we're working only as individuals. The fourth night is cooperative economics, which is a real interesting concept. Uh, it encourages you as African Americans to patronize and support other Black businesses. Though the reality of what happens is that in reality, it might be a little more expensive to do that than it is to go to Walmart, because if you are patronizing small ethnic or cultural businesses, they're generally smaller, so they can't purchase in volume and bring prices down in the way that a mega market like Walmart can. So you have to make a real commitment that you understand why it's necessary for you to support other African American businesses in particular in following the principles of Kwanzaa. Then the fifth night is to work with, it's Nia, and it's to work with purpose. That all of us should have a purpose, and sometimes those purposes are collective, and some of those are solitary, but realizing what your purpose is and what your value is and working towards fulfilling those purposes. I probably focus on the sixth night, which is creativity. And I have creative, multidisciplinary approach to almost everything. So when I'm working and maybe, for example, I'm told that I just finished doing a unit with 2-year-olders, 2 through 4-year-olders, and they really learn in a different way from us. They kind of take the whole world by storm. Well, in focusing on working with this particular group of kids who was at special care, if you're 3 years old, you're in the 3-year-old class. Whether you're in a wheelchair, whether you're hearing impaired, whether you're blind, whatever you are, you're 3 years old and you're in that class. So then my objective is to look at that group of students and to assess what we feel like is the best approach to education for them. So we're doing multiple layers of modification in order for everybody to have a success in the experience. So we're singing, we're dancing, we're doing visual art, we're doing storytelling, we're going through all of those multiple disciplines. And at the same time, I'm looking at developmental milestones and seeing how the activities that we create can also hit developmental milestones, though we may not be using that language at all. But if we are doing art, mixed medium, and maybe we're doing an activity where kids are gluing beads into place. So they're looking at it as they're able to identify color, and they're looking at small motor, which is what I'm looking at. So I'm really concerned about, can they pick up the small item and place it? though they're thinking about we get to choose whatever color we want and place it where we want it to be. So I'm always working mixed medium. Artists that work with me, in general, most people come in with a primary art discipline. And the first thing that they're approached with is my request that over a period of time, they have to develop a strength in a secondary art discipline as well. And eventually, they begin to just naturally mix the arts disciplines without thinking about it. And when they can do that, then I know that they have accomplished my primary tool, which allows them to look at multiple levels at a time. The last night of Kwanzaa is Imani, and it's the night of faith. And it leads up to the big celebration. And the final celebration is when the kids are really focused on getting gifts. That's the similarity to Christmas. The good thing about Kwanzaa is that you can get zawadis every night. And generally, they are small gifts. Generally, they are cultural and they are educational kinds of gifts. And so you can get, it's forgiving in that you may not get it right with the gift the first night, but you got 7 nights to kind of move your way along with giving multiple gifts. And it's a big gathering. And in the African American community, gatherings, of course, are all about food, and the food speaks to who you are, and it speaks to your culture. Just as he talked about the matzah, and I can remember when practicing Messianic Judaism, the wine and the homemade fresh bread was a big deal on Friday evenings. So the food that you see served during Kwanzaa speaks to the culture. If you see the setting for a Kwanzaa table, there's going to be a basket, and that basket's going to have fruit in it. It's going to have vegetables. There are always going to be ears of corn because that represents and stands for the children. And I guess that you will have many children like you have many kernels of corn. I don't know about that, but so there'll be corn, there'll be fruits, there'll be vegetables. My Kwanzaa table, which I kind of have myself surrounded right now with things that you would find on my table, with COVID coming into being, I kind of became an urban gardener as such. And so a part of my Kwanzaa table this year certainly will have many canned items, and this is all new to me. So this is like a strawberry preserve, and sometimes it's just strawberry. Sometimes I make it hot and spicy. It kind of varies, and it can be used like any jelly, spread on toast. And some people really surprise themselves that it tastes so good on a standard toast, even though it's hot at times. You don't expect the hot spices. Another common item that has come that really represents, this is called cha-cha, and it's like a collaboration because there's cabbage, there are bell peppers, multiple colors, red, orange, green. There are onions, there are green tomatoes, and they're all mixed together with, there's 7 or 8 spices that go in. Turmeric is a part of why it turns this color. And it's often served with beans. I grew up with it always being served with greens, like just splattered on top of collard greens, for example. It really is a cultural delicacy. And
Sounds really good.
you can, in the summer, and you want to have enough can that you got enough to go all the way through the winter. And it really takes you, it's like a day of cutting vegetables for me. And then it sits overnight in a marinade that's like vinegar. And then it's cooked. And then if you're preparing it to have a shelf life, then it is canned in a hot water boil. So these jars are able to sit on the shelf and not have to be refrigerated. I did a lot of canning this summer. I experimented, and I'm always experimenting culturally, and even with my canning, I went to the Asian market and I got 4 or 5 plants, and the labeling was all in obviously a script that I couldn't read. So I just picked out 4 or 5 things and I just planted it right along with the things that I knew what they were. So they were a surprise. One of which was something that was like, I think it looked like it was in the cucumber family, kind of looked squash. It was big. Dealing with getting advice from my Hispanic friends, I had a large variety of peppers. Some of them were mild and some of them were unreasonable. On the other end of the spectrum. So that was my canning cultural thing for the summer, which feeds back into the cultural aspect of Kwanzaa. And of course, they're candles.
Yes, I was going to ask about that.
And it's called the Kenora, and it I don't have my real one, but since I'm an artist, at the last minute I said, well, let me put a visual together. So where am I going? There I am. So there are 3 red candles and 3 green and 1 black in the middle. And you start from the first night you like the black one, and then you go to the left, and I don't know how it looks to you, but you go to the left, which you start with the red, and you go red, green, red, green, red, green. According to how you light your candles, it means that if you let each candle burn in its entirety each night, then you see that the first red one for the second night, you're replacing it again. So you're probably going to need like 15 red candles because each night you're replacing candles. And the Kenora will come in a lot of different shapes. Some of them look very much like a menorah, except it is 7 instead of 8. I have one that's wooden, or you can just take clay and stick the candles in the clay. There are just a number of varieties of ways that you can set it up. For my family, also during Kwanzaa, we are always going to be playing Mancala, and that is a marble stone game that would be played. For me, one of the most valuable things that happens during Kwanzaa is there's a ceremony or a time when you do a calling of names, and you're calling the names of ancestors. And so for me as an adoptive parent, that was very valuable because it allowed my children to meet ancestors. And in particular, like my father, they didn't meet my father. Only one of my kids met my father. So just to have those pictures for them to use as a point of reference. And so on my table, you're going to see, here's a photograph of my father. There's going to be, and this was back in her young days. Let me get a good, well, I'm confused here. I'm going in the wrong direction. That's kind of a glare, but that's my mother in her younger days. Of my 7 children, my son Jimmy is no longer with us, and he lived to be 20 years old. And so his name is called out, and his picture is always on the table. And then there is a tradition that I really started in the family in terms of feeling that every girl in the family, every baby girl firstborn in their family gets Rachel as a middle name. And that's in honor of my great great grandmother, Rachel. Her picture is always on the table. And then last year, a friend of mine said, "You won't believe what I found." And this is a painting that my son Jimmy did. And my son Jimmy was born without arms or legs. And so he painted and he did his writing and everything with a pen in his mouth. And she had this picture, and it's a family picture that Jimmy painted. And he has a poem attached which says, "I love my family. I like my family. My family makes me feel glad. My family looks brown. My family acts nice. Jasmine looks pretty, and mom looks pretty. And Jimmy, I look handsome." Which way am I going? And that's always on the table.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's gorgeous. Well, let me ask you, because it was something Zachary brought up, Christmas, some people say it's commercialized, and Hanukkah sometimes people say has been commercialized too. Do you feel that creeping into Kwanzaa at all, or is it managed to avoid that?
Kwanzaa is much, much, much not commercialized. Like the preference is that gifts are handmade. Or tonight at the last minute when I said, well, let me go out and get some candles and maybe there's some decorations. And I went to Michael's. I went to Walmart. I went to, where else? I went to 4 places. Nobody had, I went to the dollar store. Nobody had anything at all to do with Kwanzaa. But I do know that Amazon is accommodating. But in terms of local merchants, there was not very much at all.
Yeah.
I didn't find anything that I needed tonight. That's why you have pictures and not tapers, candles for real.
Yeah.
And I realized that more of my stuff is at home in North Carolina. And since I haven't been, because I'm usually carting things back and forth, and since I haven't been in a year and a half, it's like, oh, I didn't bring any stuff back from North Carolina. But it's not at all commercial.
That's great. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. That was, I loved that your description and how personal you made that. It was really beautiful. I appreciate that. I'm going to jump in here because I'm looking at the time, and the organizers asked me to say a few words about some of the other winter holidays. And I will say that as a Unitarian Universalist, we are a faith that is bound together not through a creed, but through the way we are with each other. It is said that you can't be a Unitarian Universalist alone. You can only be a UU in relationship with others. And because it's not a creedal faith, but rather based on how we live together, how we are together and aspire to be, there's no single set of holidays that Unitarian Universalists might celebrate in the winter. But in fact, an individual might celebrate any number of them. So many UUs celebrate Christmas. And if you were to come to one of our services right now, you would hear carols being sung. When we're in person, you would see Christmas decorations. Many celebrate Hanukkah, so we will always have a menorah out during Hanukkah time and have people sharing their own traditions with that. Not so much here in Oklahoma City, but certainly in other UU congregations, Kwanzaa is also recognized and celebrated. And a few of the holidays that people may not be so familiar with, one of them is Human Light. And Human Light, a little bit like Kwanzaa, is not specifically a religious holiday. Unlike Kwanzaa, it is also not a holiday of tradition and of background and heritage, but rather it's philosophical. And it was developed in 2001. The first Human Light was celebrated in 2001 by a group of humanists in New Jersey. Human Light celebrates the values of reason, compassion, and hope. It has been celebrated for 20 years now. This is the 20th anniversary on December 23rd. And the reason that day was picked is that it does not intentionally compete with the other major holidays. Although, of course, as we know, Hanukkah may move around, so sometimes it may overlap, but it was intended to avoid that kind of conflict. There are no universal traditions for Human Light. Very often, families or friends will get together and will have a meal. They may make art together. They may light candles. Sometimes there will be 3 or 4 candles, blue, red, and yellow or gold. And those represent those values of reason, compassion, and hope. And when there is a 4th candle, that is representing humanity. Sometimes it will be typical that a family or a group of friends will go out on that day and they will do service work. They will show the value of being a humanitarian and serving our fellow human beings. So that, in a little nutshell, is Human Light. Another one that is very Unitarian Universalist specific, and that is mostly, in my experience, celebrated by young adults, is called Chalaka. It takes place over the course of 7 days. And Chalaka is also very new. It was created in 2005 by some young adults in Seattle, and it was intended to be a specific holiday for Unitarian Universalists. And it is not commercial. If gifts are given, they are intended to be homemade. And it is more about putting values in practice. So Unitarian Universalists have a set of principles that we affirm and that we attempt to manifest in the way that we live our lives. Those principles are not written in stone. They may change over time. And in fact, right at this moment, there is discussion, and many congregations have already adopted an 8th principle, which specifically has to do with decentering white supremacy and supporting racial justice. So the principles change, but at the moment we have 7 of them. And the idea is that for each day, we do our best to take those principles and give them life. So on Monday, that principle is about affirming the inherent worth and dignity of every person. The second principle is about justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. Wednesday is acceptance of one another and encouragement to spiritual growth. Thursday is a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. Friday is the right of conscience and the use of the democratic process. The 6th principle, which would be celebrated on Saturday, is the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. And the 7th principle, which would be celebrated on Sunday, is respect for the interdependent web of life of which we are all a part. So this is Thursday. So if you were to be practicing Chalaka, and I think of it in some ways more as a spiritual practice than an actual holiday, but if you were practicing it, this would be the day we would be trying to embody the value of a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. So what might that look like? Well, appropriately, it might look like exactly what we're doing right here with different people who are searching for truth and meaning along different paths, share those paths, talk to each other about what their truth and their meaning is. So it's very appropriate, I think, that we're having this discussion this evening. The third holiday I want to talk about is winter solstice. And winter solstice is celebrated by many of our friends and family members who identify as Wiccan or as pagan or as earth-based spiritualist. And I think there is sometimes a misunderstanding thinking that, well, all pagans are the same. And that could not be further than from the truth. Paganism is not a monolithic set of beliefs or a dogma or a creed. And people tap into many different kinds of backgrounds and heritages and resources. Some might find more meaning in Celtic heritage. Some might find it in Scandinavian. Some might find it in other world heritages. What all of these have in common is that they are looking at what is happening in the world at this time of year. The longest night of the year, the shortest day of the year, in many places, the coldest time of the year, when there's worried that will there be more food? And this pagan mindset, if you will, and again, it's very, very broad, and I want to emphasize that. But one thing that it has in common is that it looks at what's going on in the world through the eyes of humanity, right? So we might hear stories about the Holly King and the Oak King, who are brothers, who are both in love with a beautiful maiden who and the Holly King is ending his time. The Holly King is growing in his strength as we approach the winter solstice. And then the Oak King takes over at the solstice as the days get longer and we move towards spring and summer and fertility and the harvest. So this idea of taking these natural processes and looking at them in terms of family, motherhood is often a theme that we find in winter solstice celebrations and rituals. This whole idea of the sun being reborn. And there's another approach to winter solstice that I just want to lift up, which is my own personal one. I identify as a religious naturalist, which just means that I find in nature awe and wonder and ethics and value and amazement of this world that we have and that people are in it. How amazing is that? And so for me, just the idea that this is the shortest day of the year and the sun is just reaching into the Tropic of Capricorn and that it appears to be holding still in the sky, that is amazing. And that seeds are still working their way under the ground, getting ready to be reborn. For me, just that is cause for celebration. So all of these are things that are celebrated. We didn't even get to talk tonight about other celebrations that change when they occur, but Diwali is one that happens in the late fall or in the winter, and there are many others, which is one reason why some people say, you know, saying happy holidays makes a lot of sense because there are a lot of different holidays at this time of year. And you can't be sure who's celebrating which one. So it can be a very kind thing to say. Well, I'm just going to pause here for a second and pop over. I'm not seeing any questions in the comments. So I'm going to come back to Ms. Dwee and ask if she would close us out this evening with the beautiful poem that she brought that summarizes a lot of what we've been talking about.
This poem was written by a young writer, a child who actually started writing at the age of 3, and his name was Maddie Stepanek. And it actually is a poem, but I think I'm singing it. No matter who you are, say a prayer, say a prayer, say a prayer this season. No matter what your faith, say a prayer this season. There's so many ways to celebrate faith, and so many faiths to celebrate life. No matter who, no matter what, no matter how you pray. Say a prayer, say a prayer, say a prayer this season. Together for peace.
Oh, that was just perfect. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Thank you for being with us tonight again and sharing your beautiful story about Kwanzaa and what it means to you. And I want to thank Zachary Kampf, who had to leave us a little because he had another obligation. And I'm so sorry that Reverend Brian Tenner wasn't able to join us this evening. And maybe there'll be another opportunity for Oklahoma Conference of Churches to talk about Indigenous approaches to the winter season. But as always, I'm very honored to be a part of Religions United, and so grateful for the work that Oklahoma Conference of Churches does for increasing the understanding of the diverse faiths and backgrounds in this state. It is so amazingly important. And so whatever holiday you celebrate, or maybe you don't celebrate any at all, and you just take this time to be quiet, that's perfectly fine too. That's what the earth is doing right now, right? Just sleeping and being quiet. So whatever it is, I wish you well. Happy holidays to all of you, and go in peace. Thank you. Good night.